Welcome to Exposed and Broken YouTube channel. We uncover the secrets of love, betrayal, and the choices that change everything.
Chapter 1: The Betrayal. David Carter never expected his life to change with a single notification. It was an ordinary Friday evening, the kind that blurred into all the others: leftover pizza on the counter, the dull hum of the television playing a rerun, and the rhythmic clicking of Ethan's keyboard in the background. David sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through emails, bills, the usual headache of adulthood. Then his phone buzzed. "Your account balance has fallen below the minimum threshold." He frowned. That couldn't be right. The college fund had more than enough in it: 6 years of careful saving, of extra shifts and skipped vacations. He had promised Ethan a future, and he had done everything in his power to make sure that promise would never be broken. David opened the banking app. The numbers loaded on the screen, and his stomach clenched. Balance, $0. For a long moment, he just stared. The number didn't change. There had to be a mistake. A glitch. Banks messed up all the time, right? His breath quickened as he scrolled through the transaction history. But there weren't multiple withdrawals. There wasn't a trail of suspicious activity. There was just one, a complete transfer from their joint account. His hands shook as he picked up his phone and called Rachel. No answer. He called again. Straight to voicemail. "Dad?" Ethan's voice pulled him back. His son stood in the doorway, tablet in hand, his face unreadable. For a moment, David couldn't find the words. How did you explain something like this to your kid? How did you tell him that his mother, had just stolen his entire future? "Where's Mom?" Ethan asked. David swallowed the lump in his throat. "I don't know." Ethan stared at him for a long moment before his gaze flickered to the phone in David's trembling hands. He nodded, just once, then turned and walked back to his room. David sat there, frozen, as the door clicked shut behind him. It wasn't until later that night that Rachel finally called back. David answered before the first ring even finished. "Rachel, what the hell, David?" She cut him off, her voice smooth, rehearsed. "I was going to tell you. You drained our savings," he seethed. "You took Ethan's college fund. Where are you?" She hesitated, just for a second. "I needed a fresh start." David's grip tightened on the phone. "A fresh start? David, you'll be fine. You and Ethan, you'll manage. But this is something I had to do for myself." His vision blurred with rage. "Don't you dare try to justify this. You didn't just steal from me. You stole from your own son." Silence. Then, a breathy sigh. "I knew you wouldn't understand." The line went dead. David sat in the darkness, phone still clenched in his fist. He had expected rage, guilt, something. But Rachel had sounded detached, like she had already moved on. A quiet creak pulled his attention. He turned to find Ethan standing in the doorway, arms crossed, expression calm. Too calm. "She's not coming back, is she?" David ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. "No, son, she's not." Ethan simply nodded, like he had already known the answer. Then, without another word, he turned and walked back to his room. David had never seen a child so unaffected by something so devastating. It wasn't until much later that he realized, Ethan had already started planning.
Chapter 2: The first move. David woke up to the sound of rapid typing. At first, he thought it was his imagination. But as he sat up and rubbed his eyes, the faint glow from Ethan's room down the hall told him otherwise. He frowned, glancing at the clock, 3:17 a.m. Sliding out of bed, he padded quietly to the doorway and pushed it open just enough to see inside. Ethan sat hunched over his desk, face bathed in the glow of his laptop screen. His fingers flew over the keyboard with an unsettling precision, his eyes locked onto the data scrolling across the monitor. David's stomach twisted. "Ethan?" His son didn't flinch. He simply reached over and minimized the window in a single fluid motion before turning around, expression unreadable. "Hey, Dad." David folded his arms. "What are you doing up?" Ethan shrugged. "Just thinking." "Thinking about what?" Ethan hesitated. Then he leaned back in his chair, tilting his head as if debating how much to say. Finally, he spoke. "About how to get Mom's money back." David's breath caught in his throat. "Ethan, she stole from us," Ethan continued, his voice eerily calm. From me. And I don't think she should get away with it. David took a cautious step into the room. Ethan, listen to me. I know you're angry, but this isn't something we can fix. Ethan's lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close. You don't have to fix it, Dad. I already started. David's pulse quickened. Started what? Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned back to the screen and reopened the minimized window. Lines of code flickered across the screen, interspersed with what looked like financial records. David felt a cold weight settle in his chest. Ethan, tell me you didn't. Relax, Dad, Ethan said smoothly. I'm just looking. Looking where? Ethan turned to him, and for the first time, David saw something in his son's eyes that unsettled him. Determination. Calculation. This is just the first move, Ethan said softly. Trust me. I know what I'm doing. David didn't know what scared him more, the fact that Ethan was doing this, or the fact that, deep down, he believed him. The silent war David knew something was off the moment Ethan started smiling more often. It wasn't a normal smile, not the kind a kid his age should have. It wasn't excitement, joy, or relief. No, this was something different. It was confidence. It was certainty. It was the look of someone who knew the ending to a story before anyone else had even finished the first page. For the first few days after Rachel's betrayal, David had expected Ethan to react like any other child, grief, anger, even confusion. But instead, his son had gone eerily quiet. No tears. No outbursts. Just calm acceptance. And now, smiles. It made David uneasy. And then he started noticing the changes. The first was the whiteboard. Ethan had dragged it out of the garage one evening, propping it up in the corner of his room. At first, David thought it was for school, some complicated math problem his son was working on. But when he got close enough to see, he realized there were no equations. Just names. Locations. Bank accounts. A timeline. He saw Rachel's name, circled 3 times. Next to it, Grant Holloway. Below that, a web of connections, transactions, companies, investments, shell corporations. Ethan, David said, keeping his voice steady. What is this? Ethan was at his desk, typing away without looking up. Research. David frowned. Research for what? Ethan finally turned, studying his father for a long moment before answering. For taking back what's ours. There was no hesitation. No second guessing. Just the certainty of a child who had already made up his mind. David took a slow breath. Ethan, this isn't a game. This isn't something we can. I know, Dad. Ethan cut him off, his voice unnervingly calm. But you're not stopping me. Not this time. The unfolding plan over the next few days, David tried not to ask too many questions. Mostly because he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answers. Ethan was glued to his computer, his tablet, even his phone. The moment David walked into a room, the screens went dark, not just turned off, but encrypted. Password locked. Untouchable. David wanted to put an end to it. To tell Ethan this wasn't right, that this wasn't how they handled things. But every time he tried, his son would look at him with that same calm certainty. I'm fixing it, Dad. And, to David's horror, things started happening. The first strike Rachel called. Not once. Not twice. 6 times in a row. David let it go to voicemail. Then his phone dinged, a text. Rachel, David, please, something's wrong. I need to talk to you. Rachel, did you mess with Grant's accounts? David's blood ran cold. He looked up from the phone to find Ethan standing in the doorway, arms crossed, watching. Ethan, he said carefully. What did you do? Ethan shrugged. Grant's finances were fragile. David's hands trembled. Ethan. Ethan stepped forward, voice still calm, too calm. They were playing with stolen money. I just made sure someone noticed. David's heart pounded. The police? Ethan shook his head. No, Dad. Not the police. The tipping point the next day, Rachel showed up at their house. David opened the door to find her standing there, disheveled, shaking, eyes filled with panic. You need to stop him. David blinked. What? Rachel glanced over his shoulder, her voice dropping to a whisper. Ethan. He's doing something, David. He's messing with Grant's business. He's making things disappear. Investments. Clients. Money. David stared at her. You're telling me my 14-year-old son is taking down a multimillionaire investor? Rachel exhaled shakily. I don't know how, but yes. David turned his head slightly, just enough to glance inside. There, standing in the hallway, was Ethan. Watching. Listening. Smiling. Rachel tried to push past David, but he stopped her. You stole everything from him. His voice was ice. And now you want me to stop him from taking it back? Rachel paled. David, he's not just taking it back. He's destroying us. David swallowed hard. The way she said it. Us. Not just Grant. Her. Rachel was part of whatever Ethan had set in motion. And for the first time, David realized, Ethan wasn't just fighting back. He was winning. And he wasn't going to stop. The silent war escalates that night. David walked into Ethan's room and sat on the bed. His son didn't stop typing. Rachel came by today. Ethan smirked. Yeah. David exhaled. She's terrified of you. Ethan's fingers paused for the briefest second before he resumed typing. Good. David felt a chill crawl down his spine. Ethan, what exactly are you doing? Ethan turned his chair toward him. She thinks I'm just taking back the money. He tilted his head. I'm not. David's throat went dry. Then what are you doing? Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper. I'm making sure she never does this again. David sucked in a sharp breath. Ethan, I know what you're thinking, Ethan interrupted. That I've gone too far. That this isn't normal. That I should be angry or crying or trying to move on. He stood up, pacing slowly. But, Dad, you know what's really not normal? David waited. Ethan stopped and turned to face him. That Mom could steal from us and get away with it. David opened his mouth, but Ethan wasn't finished. She took everything, Dad. And if I don't stop her, she'll do it to someone else. He tilted his head slightly. You told me to let it go. But you didn't stop her. You let her take the money, you let her walk away, and now you're standing here telling me not to fix it? David exhaled, running a hand down his face. I don't want you to lose yourself in this. Ethan smiled. I'm not lost, Dad. I know exactly where I'm going. And David believed him. He just wasn't sure he wanted to know where that road ended. The next move later that night, David lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. He had spent his whole life protecting Ethan. And now, for the first time, he realized, Ethan didn't need protecting. If anything, he was the one people needed to be protected from. David had spent the last few nights in restless, uneasy sleep, but tonight, he didn't even bother trying. He sat in the dim glow of the kitchen, a half-empty cup of coffee cooling in front of him. The house was silent, except for the faint, rhythmic tapping of a keyboard down the hall. Ethan was still working. David had stopped asking what exactly his son was doing. Every time he did, Ethan gave the same eerily calm answer, I'm fixing it, Dad. But this wasn't fixing, it was war. And the scariest part? Ethan was winning. The collapse begins. It started with Grant's investments. One by one, companies began pulling out, citing financial irregularities. Stocks dropped overnight. Media outlets suddenly had anonymous reports about suspicious offshore accounts linked to Grant's firm. Rachel called again, this time, sobbing. Rachel, David, please, I don't know what's happening. Everything is falling apart, Grant's assets are frozen, his accounts are under review, his clients are leaving. David didn't respond. He just listened, phone pressed to his ear, while she unraveled. Rachel, he's losing everything, David. He thinks someone's sabotaging him. She hesitated. I think it's Ethan. David closed his eyes. And what if it is? Silence. Then, a broken whisper. Rachel, you have to stop him. David exhaled. Why? Rachel, because he's not just taking the money back. He's destroying us. There it was again. Us. David realized then that Rachel wasn't calling because she cared about Grant. She was calling because she was going down with him. And Ethan? He didn't care. The warning signs. David finally confronted Ethan that night. Rachel called. Ethan was at his desk, hands moving over the keyboard with effortless precision. He didn't stop typing. Yeah. David stepped forward. She says you're destroying them. Ethan chuckled softly. Destroying is a strong word, Dad. David's pulse quickened. Ethan. What are you really doing? Ethan finally turned to face him. His expression was unreadable, not smug, not angry. Just, cold. I'm making sure they never do this again. David's stomach tightened. By ruining them? Ethan leaned back in his chair, stretching. You don't seem to understand, Dad. People like Grant. People like Mom. They don't stop unless you make them stop. His fingers tapped absently against the desk. You said it yourself, Mom took everything and never looked back. If we did nothing, she would have been fine. Grant would have kept scamming people, and she'd have lived happily ever after. David shook his head. You're 14, Ethan. This isn't your battle. Ethan smiled. Then why am I the only one winning it? David couldn't answer. Because he knew Ethan was right. Grant fights back that weekend. David noticed something strange. For the first time since Rachel had left, Ethan wasn't on his computer. He wasn't in his room. He wasn't in the garage tinkering with circuits and encrypted drives. He was sitting in the living room, flipping through channels like any normal kid. David frowned. No laptop? Ethan smirked. Don't need it right now. That's when the doorbell rang. David opened it to find a man in a suit, sunglasses perched on his nose. A private investigator. Mr. Carter? David's chest tightened. Yeah. The investigator sighed. I'm going to cut to the chase. Your ex-wife's boyfriend is looking for someone. Says his business has been targeted by cyber attacks, financial leaks, and media scandals. David's blood ran cold. The investigator took off his sunglasses. He thinks it's you. David blinked. Me? The man nodded. He says it's too precise. Too calculated. He's convinced someone is coming after him. Ethan's voice rang out from behind David, smooth as ever. He's right. David turned. Ethan stood in the doorway, hands in his hoodie pockets, smirking. The investigator raised an eyebrow. Kid, I don't think you understand. I understand perfectly, Ethan said. He tilted his head. Did Grant hire you to find out who's doing this? The investigator hesitated. Yes. Ethan grinned. Then congratulations. You just found him. David's heart stopped. Ethan, he whispered, but his son didn't even flinch. The investigator stared at Ethan, then at David. Is this a joke? Ethan shook his head. Nope. David swallowed hard, stepping in front of Ethan. Listen, my son is just a kid. There's no way he's responsible for, Dad, Ethan interrupted. Stop. David turned. Ethan's eyes were steady. Unshaken. The investigator exhaled, rubbing his forehead. Look, Grant doesn't have proof. He just has suspicions. He told me to check you out, see if there's anything to link you to what's happening. Ethan smiled. And? The investigator studied him for a long moment. Nothing. No trail. Whoever's doing this, he glanced at Ethan, is a ghost. Ethan nodded, satisfied. Then I guess your job here is done. The investigator narrowed his eyes. Kid, you better hope Grant never finds out what's really going on. Ethan's smile widened. Oh, he won't. The investigator hesitated, then turned to David. I'd keep an eye on him. David could only nod. The moment the man left, David whirled on Ethan. What the hell was that? Ethan shrugged. I knew he wouldn't find anything. David's hands shook. You just admitted everything. Ethan grinned. Did I? David stared, breath unsteady. Ethan, Grant is dangerous. Ethan's expression darkened. So am I. The trap is set later that night. David found Ethan back at his computer, eyes locked on the screen. What are you doing now? Ethan didn't look up. Grant's getting desperate, he murmured. He's going to try something soon. Maybe hiring someone worse than that investigator. Maybe coming himself. David shivered. So what do we do? Ethan's fingers danced over the keyboard. We make sure that when he does, he walks straight into a trap. David felt a chill crawl down his spine. His son wasn't just planning anymore. He was preparing for war. David barely slept that night. Ethan's last words echoed in his head, we make sure that when he does, he walks straight into a trap. David wasn't sure what scared him more, the certainty in Ethan's voice or the fact that he was right. Grant wasn't going to sit back and lose. He was too rich, too powerful, too arrogant. And men like him didn't go down quietly. They fought back. And when they had nothing left to lose, they became dangerous. David didn't know how or when it would happen, but he knew one thing for sure, Grant Holloway was coming. And Ethan was waiting. It happened the next afternoon. David was home alone, staring blankly at his coffee cup, when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. But something in his gut told him to. Hello? A pause. Then, a familiar voice. Rachel. David, she breathed. You need to listen to me. David's jaw tightened. No, Rachel. I don't. You do, she insisted. Grant is coming. David gripped the counter. Coming where? To you. To Ethan. David's heart dropped. Rachel, he's losing everything, she cut in. His money. His clients. His reputation. And he knows Ethan is behind it. David went cold. How? Because I told him. Silence. David's grip tightened around the phone. You what? I didn't have a choice, she stammered. He was going to blame me. I had to give him something. David's mind reeled. You threw your own son under the bus? Rachel's breath hitched. I thought, maybe if he knew it was just a kid, you thought wrong. David ended the call. His hands were shaking. His mind was racing. Grant was coming. And now, thanks to Rachel, he knew exactly who to go after. Preparing for war, David stormed into Ethan's room. Grant knows. Ethan didn't even blink. I know. David's stomach twisted. How? Ethan turned his laptop toward him. On the screen was Grant's phone activity. Calls. Messages. GPS tracking. David felt his blood run cold. You tapped his phone. Ethan smirked. Of course. David exhaled sharply. Ethan, listen to me. This isn't a game anymore. Ethan leaned back in his chair. It never was. David clenched his jaw. I'm serious. He's coming. Rachel said. Ethan cut him off. I know what she said. I was listening. David flinched. You hacked my phone too. Ethan just shrugged. David pinched the bridge of his nose. Ethan, for God's sake, it doesn't matter, Ethan said, standing up. Let him come. David's pulse quickened. Ethan, we're ready. David blinked. We? Ethan grabbed his tablet and pulled up another screen. David's heart nearly stopped. It wasn't just Grant's accounts. It was his entire security system. Camera feeds. Alarm logs. Entry codes. David felt a lump form in his throat. Ethan, he whispered, what have you done? Ethan met his eyes. I've set the stage. And then, like a director calling the final shot, now it's time for the main act. The showdown. The doorbell rang at 9:12 p.m. David's stomach twisted. This was it. He turned to Ethan. Stay here. Ethan didn't respond. He just smiled. David took a breath, steeled himself, and opened the door. Grant Holloway stood on the porch. And he wasn't alone. Two men flanked him, tall, broad, ex-military types. David's pulse pounded in his ears. Grant smiled. But it wasn't friendly. It was the smile of a man who knew he had already won. David. David swallowed hard. Grant. Grant tilted his head. Let's not waste time. We both know why I'm here. David kept his voice steady. Do we? Grant chuckled. Your son has been a very bad boy. David clenched his fists. Ethan's just a kid. Grant's smile widened. And yet, he managed to dismantle everything I built. He took a slow step forward. You're going to fix this, he said. You're going to make him undo everything he did. David forced himself to hold his ground. And if I don't? Grant's expression darkened. Then I'll make sure he never touches a computer again. David's stomach twisted. But before he could respond, Ethan's voice cut through the silence. No, you won't. Grant turned. Ethan stood in the hallway, calm as ever. You won't touch me, Ethan continued, stepping forward. Because if you do, the authorities will get everything. Grant narrowed his eyes. What the hell are you talking about, kid? Ethan smiled. David knew that smile. It was the smile Ethan had when he already won. I've been recording this conversation since you stepped onto the porch, Ethan said. And I have a direct live stream running to your clients. The same clients who just lost their money because of you. Grant's face paled. You're bluffing. Ethan pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Somewhere inside Grant's pocket, his own phone started ringing. Grant froze. Ethan tilted his head. Check your messages. Grant hesitated. Then, slowly, he pulled out his phone. The color drained from his face. David took a slow breath. What did you do? Ethan turned to him. I sent a message to every single one of Grant's associates. He turned back to Grant. They all know the truth now. Grant's hand shook as he scrolled through the messages. His own voice, recorded. His own threats, documented. And then, the final nail in the coffin. A single email, sent to the authorities. Subject, criminal confession attached. David exhaled. Ethan, but Ethan wasn't looking at him. He was looking at Grant. Leave, Ethan said quietly. And don't come back. Grant stood there, breathing hard, fists clenched. For a long moment, David thought he was going to do something reckless. But then, slowly, Grant turned to his men and nodded. Without another word, they stepped off the porch and disappeared into the night. David stood frozen, heart pounding, barely able to process what just happened. Finally, he turned to Ethan. Ethan smiled. I told you, Dad. He slipped his phone into his pocket. I set the stage. I just needed him to play his part. David swallowed. He should have felt relief. But all he felt was fear. Because his son wasn't just winning. He was controlling everything. And David wasn't sure he could stop him.
Hit that bell button, like and subscribe. Keep watching Exposed and Broken. See you soon.